How you going, guys? And this video is going to be very exciting for me to present because it's always about my favorite topic, spirituality, non-duality, the nature of consciousness, all that beautiful stuff. But when I saw this video come up in my YouTube feed on the Diary of a CEO, a very popular podcaster, I think his name's Stephen. I've seen a couple of his podcasts in the past. Once I saw Alex O'Connor's name, I thought, wow, this is going to be great. Also, Dr. K. I wasn't familiar with the Christian gentleman in this podcast. I'll have to do a bit more research on him. But basically, Alex O'Connor, if you haven't heard of him, you should. 1.7 million subscribers, or close to it, if I'm not mistaken. A well-known atheist/agnostic on YouTube. And he has many discussions with various types of people. Many Christians he has discussions with. Really intelligent young man. Also, Dr. K, he's a psychiatrist. I've seen him on the Diary of a CEO a couple of times. Psychiatrist and coming from a Hindu background and a Hindu perspective. And this video will be a reaction video to that video. And you would have seen, of course, Alex O'Connor in the thumbnail with the caption, is he attracted to Hinduism? Is he going to be into Advaita Vedanta? Who knows? I'm not claiming anything, but it's really beautiful to see his thoughts on consciousness and the nature of reality. And let's go into the first clip and we'll have a little discussion about it after that. This will be about Alex describing his views on the nature of consciousness. He subscribes to a view called Panpsychism. So let's see what he has to say.
We were going to talk about consciousness, which we didn't, and perhaps it's a good job that we didn't because it's just such a big topic. But my views on consciousness are crucial to my sense of sort of what it's all about, as it were. Because the greatest mystery that we are confronted with every single day, if you just take a moment to remember it, is that we are conscious, is that we are experiencing things from a first-person perspective, that I have thoughts which are inaccessible to you and you have thoughts which are inaccessible to me. It's extremely strange. So there's a view that I'm quite attracted to in the philosophy of mind called Panpsychism, which literally means sort of like the view that consciousness is everywhere or in everything. It doesn't mean that everything is conscious. It doesn't mean this pen is conscious. What it means is that the stuff that the universe is made out of, so the fundamental matter of the universe, has at least mental properties, or might be mental properties. Because when you say, for example, we're in a world of like molecules in motion, right? Mm-hmm. I understand that sentiment. But if you ask a scientist, what is stuff actually made out of? Ultimately speaking, they will not be able to tell you.
For you personally, what makes your life full of purpose and meaning?
I can just jump there, but it won't make much sense, because what I would say is something like a recognition of the illusion of divisible selves, which doesn't make a ton of sense.
I can explain
unless you lay the groundwork, which can be explained in many different ways, and in fact is something which most like the Vedic tradition. It's one of the reasons I'm so attracted to it, and particularly the Upanishads, is because they seem to embody this idea. They're constantly banging on about how the individual self, the individuated person, is an illusion, and there is one ultimate self. They call it Atman.
But are you going to have kids?
I don't know.
Do you want to have kids?
I hope so, yeah.
So you do want to have kids?
Oh, yeah.
Why?
So as you saw in that clip, Alex O'Connor is liking the idea of panpsychism. Now, this isn't what non-duality Advaita Vedanta is saying, because panpsychism is basically the belief that everything in reality has every atom, you could say, every subatomic particle has little packets of consciousness in it. See, Advaita Vedanta says that the fabric nature of reality is pure consciousness that appears as an objective reality. Panpsychism is saying there is objective matter with just little packets of consciousness in it. One of the problems with panpsychism is called the combination problem. We have a unified experience of reality. It's smooth, unified. But what they're saying with the combination problem of panpsychism is, if every atom or every subatomic particle had little bits of consciousness in it and you clump them together, reality would appear pixelated. That's one argument against panpsychism. But I won't make this video all about the criticisms of panpsychism. But it's beautiful to see Alex. This is what I'm saying about an open-minded atheist. Not an atheist that just takes on beliefs and shuts out learning. Because when you take on some old concepts about science and you don't want to progress, or you're very adverse to teachings of God or spirituality, you're as closed-minded as those Christians many atheists stereotype them as. Bible bashing, you're going to go to hell, repent. A lot of atheists think Christians are closed-minded, that they can't see anything else. If you're a closed-minded atheist, you're giving off the same energy. But the beautiful thing about Alex is he's open-minded to it. He's open-minded. He's genuinely trying to discover truth. And like I said, panpsychism, really good first step. But ultimately, in Advaita Vedanta's opinion, there aren't little bits of matter with consciousness in all of them. Only consciousness is. Appearing as a reality. Much like in our dreams. When we fall asleep and start dreaming, a material universe apparently appears. Of separate people, places and objects. Also, you would have noticed at the end of that clip, the host, Stephen, cuts him off and says, are you going to have children? All that kind of stuff. The reason he cuts him off is because the whole overarching theme of this podcast is finding meaning and purpose in life. And if removing spirituality has helped us, many people are in misery and suffering because once you remove the spiritual aspect of life, you lose a sense of meaning, a sense of higher purpose. And I have linked the entire podcast in the description. Watch it from start to finish. Especially the last hour, which all these clips are coming from. It's when they really get into the nature of consciousness, non-duality, and Hinduism. Really good stuff. But in the next clip, we're going to see, let's hear Alex's thoughts on, if this is true, that the nature of reality is consciousness, how he doesn't want to go around hurting others, because fundamentally he'd be hurting himself. Also, he gives a theory presented by Aldous Huxley. Aldous Huxley came up with a theory that the brain is like a reducing valve for consciousness. In other words, there's consciousness and the brain limits our experience to just this experience. If that valve is opened, we're taking in too much information. There is so much information and data that we couldn't function if it was constantly streaming through this mind. So the brain is like a reducing valve. The brain constricts experience, but when you take psychedelics or go into deep states of meditation, things like that, the brain or the default mode network shuts down or something like that. But I'll let him explain it. Really beautiful ideas.
If it is true that there is this sort of thing called consciousness that the universe is made out of, and brains are kind of complex organizations of consciousness, then when you ask me, like, you know, what's wrong with harming another person on this worldview, on this materialistic worldview? Well, I think the material of the universe is consciousness, and I think that when I harm someone else, it could literally, in a fundamental sense, be a case of self-harm. By the way, can I just say, because it sounds a little bit insane, without the space to explain the panpsychist worldview, it sounds absolutely mental. But there are some really interesting clues. Can I give you one clue? This is really, really fascinating about the fact that the brain, as Aldous Huxley said, was a tool for focusing the mind. Aldous Huxley writes in the Doors of Perception. Essential reading to anybody interested in consciousness, by the way. Aldous Huxley in the 20th century takes a psychedelic drug, and he writes about his experience. And he writes about it beautifully. And one of the things he realizes is that his mind has been opened. And he thinks, okay, well, if my mind has been opened during this experience, then that means that in normal waking hours, something must be closing my mind. What could be closing my mind? Answer, the brain. He concludes that the brain is a tool for focusing the mind. So, the psychedelic experience, this is before we'd done any scientific experiments on this. You can scan people's brains in like an fMRI scanner, right? Okay. So when you take a psychedelic drug, your experience just blows up, right? You start seeing colors you didn't know existed. You start experiencing things as if they were new. It's like the experience is unimaginable. So we've taken people and we've measured their brain activity, and their brain activity is at a certain level. And then you give them a psychedelic drug and you put them in the MRI scanner and their brain activity goes down. Brain activity goes down as the mental experience expands and goes up, which for the person who experiences the psychedelic drug, they will report this as a feeling that they just get from the experience. The scientist who measures the brain activity, the sages writing the Upanishads, the Buddhist monk after a series of long meditation will all say the same thing, which is that in some inexplicable way, consciousness is more foundational than the brain is. And the brain is focusing consciousness, and in some sense that means that our individuated selves are essentially illusory.
I'm going to do my best.
In the same way that distinction between objects are illusory.
To support what you're saying. I totally empathize with having fallen into this mistake of invoking karma and not having the bandwidth to explain what I mean.
Yeah.
Opening myself up to misinterpretation.
That's also why I completely understand what you said a moment ago, which is...
So guys, I really love that clip, especially when he talks about Aldous Huxley, how the brain can be seen as a reducing valve for consciousness. Really interesting stuff. It's basically showing you, this is a theory of course, that the brain doesn't produce consciousness, it inhibits consciousness to a certain bandwidth. Because again, if you open that valve and allow all information in, you couldn't function. And also this will explain, if this theory is true, how we can read minds. Mind reading, reading past, reading future. It is the one fundamental source prior to time and space, yet the fabric all time and space is made from. So this is why when you open your mind to new ideas, you can see how all this could be possible. If we are part of one unified mind, of course, seeing into past and future, which is an illusion, it's all happening in the present moment, is possible. How mind reading is possible. If you reduce this valve, that is the brain, through psychedelics or deep meditation, other spiritual practice, the mind opens up to newer possibilities. So this whole theory of the brain producing consciousness is becoming fast outdated. How can unconscious objective matter produce non-objective consciousness? That's why it's called the hard problem of consciousness. It's like a magic trick. So science is slowly progressing. And it's very encouraging to see these modern scientists and thinkers taking on the ideas of ancient cultures, such as Hinduism, such as Advaita Vedanta, that the fabric of reality is consciousness. In this next clip, the psychiatrist, Dr. K, starts giving his explanation on the nature of meaning. This podcast, again, is all about finding meaning. And he's saying having a relationship with a transcendent power brings the ultimate meaning of life. And also how we need to understand all this spiritual practice, all this spiritual knowledge, but then have a direct experience. And also Alex joins in and agrees. He also mentions a story regarding Blaise Pascal's experience with God. And that is exactly what I'm trying to say with many videos and spiritual practice, which is, it's good to hear all this, but you need to put this stuff into action to have the direct experience yourself. What is beyond the mind? Consciousness, God, your true self. To just intellectualize this isn't going to change your life, but to have a deep, direct experience through meditation and through constant contemplation of this is the path you need to walk alone. And again, that's why I've said in the past, God is found in the heart. Heart represents intuition. The mind intellectualizes all of reality, but God is found in the heart, in intuition. God is prior to words, prior to language. You need to take on these concepts and have a direct experience for yourself. That's what I'm saying. That's what Advaita Vedanta is saying. And it's good to see someone like Alex and Dr. K saying this. So let's check out the clip.
So how do you find that last chunk, that last step of the way there is through the direct experience of Brahman. So when he says panpsychism, in the Hindu system, we believe that consciousness is the foundational element of the universe.
That Atman is Brahman.
Atman is not Brahman, well, sort of, yes and no. Atman is individual soul, Brahman is the cosmic soul, the cosmic consciousness. That the fundamental thing that is out there is transcendent, and having a relationship with that thing is how we get meaning. This is how we get a 9 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10 meaning. Because this guy has done something where he had this experience where he's been talking to God, but one day someone answered the phone. And when you have that transcendent experience, when you have this direct experience of the Brahman, and this is why I've been avoiding saying it, because it's completely undefensible. It is what I believe is philosophically true. It is what I believe is absolutely true. And it is not transmissible. It can only be witnessed.
Exactly. That's the most important point, is that, and it's why I say that this is something that everybody has to start afresh, because if there is an answer to this question, it is something that you cannot syllogize. By the way, this isn't just some Hindu thing. Like Christians say the same thing about their religious experiences. The ineffable quality. William James famously tried to identify the characteristic aspects of religious experience, and one of the most important was the ineffability, the inability to explain. That's what that means. Like the inability to put into words and to explain and to say what it's like. And interestingly, some of my favorite examples of this throughout history have been some of the most important Christian thinkers of all time who have essentially abandoned the project of communicating ideas to other people. I mentioned Blaise Pascal earlier. He famously had his Night of Fire, where he has a religious experience, and he's one of the greatest writers in Christian history. And he has this experience of God, and he writes in his diary, and later has it etched into his jacket. Fire, he writes, not the God of the philosophers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. Because he realizes that he's experienced something which is not this abstract first cause design of the universe. It's not that. It's something more deeply personal.
So in this final clip, Dr. K will take us out regarding ego. This is what it all comes down to. That's why I keep mentioning spiritual practice. Spiritual practice is meant to weaken the ego. The ego thinks it has ownership and control. By offloading this ownership and control to a higher power, or realizing your true self has no ownership and control, it lowers and weakens the ego. The ego still functions, but it's on life support. You still need the ego to feel like I'm a person living a life, but you don't take this person to be you anymore. That's the whole point. Which Dr. K sums up beautifully in the coming clip regarding this is what religion's doing, this is what psychedelics are doing. He also, being a psychiatrist, says when you have a strong ego, it can lead to depression. Because what do we think about when we think about ego? Or a narcissist, someone that's all about themselves. My life, my world, very manipulating, very charming to get what they want. That's the average view of a narcissist. They can be very outgoing, very charming. They're doing it all for themselves. But also, as Dr. K is going to mention, people suffering depression, this is also coming from ego. Because why? It's all about me, my life, my problems, my suffering. Get rid of this ego and you won't think about your own life and problems so much. That's what I constantly talk about in these videos on spiritual practice. Realize this world has nothing to do with you. You have no ownership and control. Flip the mindset from selfish to selfless and watch how all your suffering slowly evaporates in time, slowly. But let's watch Dr. K's clip and have an ending discussion.
But okay, so panpsychism. There's this idea that there's this weird collective consciousness. That's the basic unit. I think we can easily call it God, a relationship with that thing. So I'm down here, it's up there. So the key thing is if we look at psychedelic usage, if we look at dark night of the soul, if we look at these moments of rapture where you go into church and one of two things is happening, either your psychological defense mechanisms are creating the ultimate cope and you're saying, now I'm healed, even though you're not, or you actually have a direct experience of God and you are transformed. What is the nature of that transformation? It is the loss of ego. That is the most conserved thing. We surrender before God. Before God, we are nothing, right? Doesn't matter which religion you talk to. This is where I think that there's like evidence of truth with a capital T, because human beings from all over the planet have done these explorations using the technology of our mind and our consciousness, and we arrive at very similar conclusions. So the beautiful thing is that when our ego is active in the most powerful way, it becomes narcissism. Also becomes things like depression. Still actually a very ego. I'm terrible, I'm pathetic, I'm worthless, the world would be better off without me. The focus is on me. It's hyperactive default mode network. So in order to connect to the divine, you need to dissolve your ego as much as possible.
And the ending of that clip sums up spirituality in a nutshell. lowering the ego. This is all about lowering ego. There's the true self, or you can say God, and the ego. Once the ego is removed or lowered, the true self or God can shine. And that is why I say God is found in the heart. To those atheists out there that are very critical and mocking, what do you mean God's found in the heart? This is exactly what I'm saying, what spiritual traditions are saying, what religion's saying. God is an intuition. God is a felt experience. God is prior to language. You can't get to God with all this intellectualizing. That's what Blaise Pascal was saying when he said, stop seeking God with more and more proof. The way to God is by lowering passions. Passions and desires. The mind is always extroverted. Passions, desires, my beliefs, my wants, my opinions. Get rid of all this conceptual thinking. God shines. God is here. Intuition in the heart. We need conceptual frameworks to understand a religious or spiritual path, but then we need to take action. We need to put in the spiritual practice. Karma yoga, service, devotion, meditation. All this chips away at our conceptual thinking and believing we are that conceptual thinking, and the truth will shine in you. There is no objective truth in the objective reality. You are the truth. That's what they're saying in Advaita Vedanta. You want the truth? You can't find it because you are the truth. The nature of reality is consciousness, conscious existence. If the nature of reality was water, a whirlpool, which you are, forming in this ocean of existence, is looking around reality going, I want to understand truth. Let me look through this ocean to find truth. You're drowning in truth. You're made of truth. There isn't even you and truth. You are the truth. Again, a whirlpool in water, trying to study water, will not come up with anything. That's what science is doing. They're zooming in and in and in. They're coming up with nothing. They're coming up with pure consciousness. It's like a dream scientist in a dream. If you keep zooming into a dream, what do you find? Just mind. And that's what all this is leading to. The nature of reality is consciousness. That's why we're sitting around fascinated by consciousness. We're studying ourselves. You know why we're fascinated by consciousness and the mystery and miracle of existence? Because we're fascinated by ourselves. What a mystery and miracle knowing our own existence is. It's the total mystery. Our mind loves mystery. Our mind loves to know truth, but it will never get there because you are the truth. And once that truly dawns on you and clicks, the mind goes silent. The mind gets stunned into silence, but paradoxically, then out of that silence outpours all these feelings of love, gratitude, service, and devotion. That's when you sit and contemplate this. When you go beyond conceptual thinking, sit in deep meditation, or do a lot of self-inquiry and realize what you truly, truly are is so transcendent, so beyond words. It just fills you with love, peace, gratitude, and the miracle and wonder of a child again. And Dr. K mentions this in another part of this podcast, and I totally agree. I was thinking this about Alex before I even watched this podcast. Dr. K mentions to Alex later on, I feel you're going to go down the path of gnosis, knowledge. And I felt the same. The way Alex talks to his guests, has an open mind, I could tell. He's only 26. It wouldn't surprise me if he gets into Advaita Vedanta. He's already saying he's attracted to the Upanishads, Hindu thought. So who knows? He's a young man. It'll be very interesting to see his progress over the years. I'll leave the video there, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. See you guys in the next one. Take care.